Gente Por Quê, porque vai ser em inglês com o nosso amazing teacher Paulo here. And we're going to be talking about how to overcome the fear of learning a new language. So, teacher, tell us, how can we overcome the fear of learning a new language?
Overcoming the fear of learning a new language. Well, I think learning a new language is like learning anything, really. So, for instance, take as an example, if you want to ride a bicycle, what do you have to do?
You have to get a bicycle.
You have to get a bicycle. So for you to learn a language, you have to practice it.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of students when they come to me and they say, teacher, I have a lot of difficulties talking to people in English. Or when I'm with friends or in the classes, I have a lot of difficulties to say because I'm afraid I'll say it wrong. And I think that this is the first mystery that needs to be revealed. Like firstly, we are all Brazilians. Not you,
yeah,
I am. And the students are. And that's the first point, because you have to understand that you don't speak English. That's not your language. So it's okay, it's completely normal for you not to know how to speak it.
Yes.
That's the first point. You have to overcome this obstacle. There will always be, this obstacle will always be there when you learn any language, and when you learn English, it's not different.
But I think that students, they try to be Americans, they try to they start learning the language trying to be like the people from the United States or from London, and they come and say, I want to be very fluent, but fluent doesn't mean that you will become the language or that you will become the nationality of that language that language comes from. So I think that we need to start learning a language with the knowledge of I am not from the United States. I'm gonna use this as a tool to get to a place to share information, right? It's gonna be a tool. You will not if you're not American, you never be 100% fluent, right?
No, that's impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's completely impossible for you to be 100% fluent in language. That is not your language. The only language you are 100% fluent in control of it is your mother tongue. When it comes to your mother tongue, you have control of it. Even if you, first of all, there is no way you speak your mother tongue wrongly. That doesn't exist. If you think about your mother tongue, and I'm going to go back to English in a few minutes, allow me just to explain this so that I can get back to English. When it comes to your mother tongue, you're in control of it. Grammar, the rules, don't apply to spoken language. So, for instance, you speak Spanish. Anywhere you go in your country, yes, because we have the different variations of Spanish.
Yeah.
If in your country, any city you go, any village, any neighborhood whatsoever, any person you speak to in your country, you will understand them. And you will be understood because that's your language.
Yeah.
You're in control of it. But when you study English, which is not your language, which is not my language, when we study English, if we go to a small village in the middle of Scotland, we are not understanding anything.
Yeah.
And that's one very important thing for you to understand. Foreign languages are not your mother tongue. So there's no such thing as I will control English or French or Spanish, in my case, not yours, or German or Russian, 100%. That's impossible because you have to think about, if you go I want to speak the British English. Firstly, you have to understand that in England itself, there are a bunch of cities. And in each city, there are a bunch of people. And each person applies the British English differently.
Yeah.
So it's impossible for you to be 100% in control of English.
And that's a truth that students need to understand and accept when they're trying to learn it.
Yeah,
right?
I never forget, a long time ago, I had a basic class. And right on our first class, I asked the students, I said, what's your goal? And then they all said, it was really funny because they all said together, it was 8 students in the class, and they all said together, to speak like Americans. And then I said, you never will.
Yeah.
And they were like, why? And then I said, because because it's impossible. You are here to be fluent, and that leads to what you said. Being fluent is not controlling your language 100%.
Yeah.
Is being able to communicate
exactly.
and understand. That's it. So if you speak English wrongly, but you speak correctly enough to be understood,
that's a goal.
you're fluent.
Yes, exactly.
That's the point. So I think that this, I want to speak English like Americans do. I want to speak the British accent, the Australian accent, whatever accent you want to speak like they do. Like phonetically, you may imitate the sounds, but like truly, you can't do that.
Yeah, that's something actually you said that is really true. When I learned English, I was like, my English accent was really good. Was really, really good. And then I came here to Brazil. I was talking a different language that is not my mom's language, right? And my mother's tongue. And when I started speaking English here in Brazil, my accent in English changed, you know?
Portuguese destroyed her.
Yeah, it destroyed my accent. So what do you think about that? Like when people get in, like they close their mind of being, you know, perfect, not only in grammar, but also in the accent way, you know? What can we do to change that? Like to change that mentality of trying to be perfect, you know, in one language that is not ours.
Well, accepting that you are not perfect. Like in everything.
Yeah.
So we are not perfect in anything we do.
Mm-hmm.
So we are not going to be perfect in speaking language. It's funny. I mean, it's so simple. We will always go back to the same point: the mother tongue and the foreign language. Our tongue, we apply itself perfectly because it's ours.
Yeah.
And it's not, and I don't say it's ours because it was taught. No, it's ours because if you think about it, I spoke Portuguese before I went to school. You spoke Spanish before you went to school.
That's
you didn't learn the language at school.
That's true.
We learned the language at home. So before we realized that a bunch of rules existed, a bunch of grammar rules and structures exist, before we realized that something called oração subordinada existed, we already spoke Portuguese. So we control it before we understood it. So when you say that your mother tongue is yours, it's because you understood it.
Like it becomes part of you.
Exactly. It actually becomes more than part of you. It's your mirror. It's how you see the world. But if you think about foreign languages, the process is not the same. Firstly, because that's not your language. If you think like physically, the brain itself, like when you study linguistics, you understand this. The brain, it keeps your mother tongue in one area and then it keeps all the foreign languages in a different area. For you to speak a foreign language, you need to pass through your mother tongue. So this language, the foreign language, any foreign language you learn, it's not going to be the same as your mother tongue. You're going to have to memorize the rules.
Yes.
You will make mistakes because it's not your language. You don't control it. You don't apply it the way you want. But your mother tongue, you apply it the way you want.
Exactly.
And that's a very important perspective that any student needs to understand.
That's right.
You don't need to speak a foreign language perfectly. You don't need to have a perfect American accent. You don't need to have a perfect British accent or any English accent whatsoever. You need to have your accent.
Yeah, control over the tool that you have given.
Exactly. That's it.
Yeah.
It's like, well, let's go back to riding a bicycle or let's go back to playing soccer. Any person can play soccer, but not every person who plays soccer can be a professional soccer player.
Exactly.
You can ride your bicycle, but that doesn't mean that you can actually compete on Tour de France, for instance.
Yeah.
You're gonna die, going up the mountains.
For sure.
I would certainly die.
Yeah. Me
And
too.
I ride bicycle a lot. So, I mean, that's a nice parallel that we can trace to explain
Good.
this.
Very good. So we have a question from one of our students. She asked, why do we have fear when the time of speaking the language starts, like it comes to us?
That's an interesting question. I think that because we think that we may be perfect. And then that, instead of that thought pushing us forward, it actually limits us.
Yeah, that's true.
So we're like, and it's kind of a frustration feeling, really, because you've been studying for so long. You've been memorizing structures, you've been memorizing rules and etc. You've been trying to understand, and then when you speak it, you were like, what do I say? You know?
Yeah.
And then you feel frustrated, and then that's it. When you feel frustrated at the moment of speaking, then you won't speak at all.
Yeah.
Like you will feel embarrassed. I was having a conversation with a student this week, and he said to me, like, teacher, me, myself and I, for instance, I don't fear speaking incorrectly. And I thought, oh, that's lovely.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said something that's very true. He said, when I speak incorrectly, then I realized, because then you corrected me. And then I realized where I made the mistake. And I was like, wait, that's the point. So, I mean, for you to speak a foreign language correctly, I think you need to be brave enough to...
Make mistakes.
Exactly, to make mistakes. That's a very important point.
Very good, very good. I don't know you, but when I was learning, I think everybody, like every student I had, they always said, I understand mostly 90% of everything you're saying, you know. But when it is the time to talk, everything is blank, you know. What do you think? Besides trying to be perfect, what do you think that happens? You know, do you think that people in general, they have it's easier for them to learn by hearing than by speaking, or mostly I think 90% of my students, they have that problem, you know. They feel comfortable by writing or by understanding something, but when they have to talk, everything is blank. Why do you think that happens?
Lack of practice.
Yeah.
Listening is a very interesting approach when it comes to learning, because if you think about it, that's how we learned our language.
True.
But learning a language like we learned our mother tongue is something that happens when you're 3 years old, 4 years old. That's it. And then the brain closes itself. That's the one language. So if you don't allow yourself to practice speaking, you won't learn a language just by listening to it, because that's not how the puzzle functions. You have to put the pieces in place when it comes to a foreign language. So you have to do something to apply yourself to practice speaking. If you have a friend who speaks English, if you don't have a friend but you have yourself, speak to yourself in the mirror.
Exactly. That's a good one.
Exactly.
Never thought of it.
Yeah, I was a crazy person when I was growing up. And when I began studying English, I went full craziness. So I used to play, I was 12 years old, I used to play in my backyard. I had my father's barbecue knives, and I used to play medieval films, epic films, fighting the trees in my backyard. And when, at the moment I began studying English, I began using it when I was playing it. So it was really funny, because before I had my first English class, I used to speak a certain language that is not a language, but I thought was English, because I used to watch a bunch of films, and I used to memorize the lines and reproduce the lines when I was playing, but I didn't reproduce them correctly.
Yeah.
So I was just mumbling words, sounds, weird sounds. When I had my first English class, I went back home. I remember perfectly. I went back home. The first thing I did was I put my school bag on my bed, and then I went to the backyard, and then I played a film, and I used all the phrases and vocabulary I learned at that class. So that first class, my first lesson was verb be. So when I got home, I began thinking about all the possible words I could use at that moment, playing an epic film on my backyard, and then I used verb be. So everything I was saying, like in my mind, I knew what I was saying, but I was speaking. Everything I was speaking was like a verb be structure. It had nothing to do, but I was making sense of what I learned, and I think that's the best way for you to practice speaking.
Yeah.
You have to
put yourself out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have to put yourself in a position where you actually take everything you learn and you apply it.
Really good. That's really good. I have, like, in my experience, I did learn by hearing. Like, everything I did when I was like a teenager was listening to music in English, or like watching videos and watching films, you know. So when I did start talking, you know, trying to put myself in that place, I remember phrases from those movies or those songs, you know. But the time when I was hearing those, I didn't even understood, but I knew how to say them because, you know, I heard them time and again. So I think that the blank spot that lots of our students have is the fear, like they have that fear speaking because they don't practice it, you know, like if you do practice it alone, you know, like step by step you overcome that fear, right?
It's like music, ladies and gentlemen. If you have a gig and you don't rehearsal,
exactly,
you may know the song. I mean, lovely. Okay, there are a bunch of songs I know how to play on the piano or on acoustic guitar, and there are a bunch of songs I know how to sing. But if I have a big gig and I don't rehearsal and I just trust myself, and I know the song, I know what I'll do, and I go up stage and there are a bunch of people there, you know, I'm taking the risk of messing it up because I didn't rehearsal it. If you rehearsal it, then you have like something to base yourself on, to lean on. Yeah. Okay, I did rehearsal, I know what to do. It's like when you don't rehearsal, you go up a stage without knowing what you do. You simply go up a stage and you do it. So you can do it nicely, or you can
not.
Exactly. It can be terribly hard.
Yeah.
But if you rehearsal it,
you feel free.
Exactly.
Yeah, right?
You feel confident.
Yeah.
You know what to do.
Exactly. Really good.
I would say that's a nice parallel. I just thought that.
Yeah.
Register that on my name. Thank you. We can say student.
Yeah.
Practice speaking.
Please.
Accept your flaws.
Good.
Make mistakes.
That's how you learn.
Exactly. Making mistakes is part of life.
Yes.
And you will make mistakes. You will pronounce everything wrong. No, not everything. You will pronounce words wrong.
Okay.
It happens. Even if you think about it, even Americans pronounce words wrong.
Brazilians do in Portuguese.
Exactly.
Many times.
Exactly. So if you, alright, you want to speak like Americans, okay, Americans make mistakes when they speak English, so you will make mistakes.
That's a great point. That's a great point to finish.
Don't speak like Americans, speak like British people.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's it for today's, guys.